since the election, you do have a deep sense of from these women and from the data, they literally say we feel like we're going backwards, and the economic angst is real. Look,
Mm-hmm.
in 2024, 40% of African American women said that the economic conditions in the country are getting worse. Today, that's 87, right? It's near universally felt that by these African American women that the overall economy is getting worse, right? And in 2024 when we did this, we had just 37% of African American women saying they felt like they were falling behind their economic conditions, they were falling behind economically. Now you have a majority, 57% of African American women say that they are falling behind economically, right? So we have a tremendous shift of what's happening with African American women. And as Gabrielle talked about, right, we even delved into sort of questions around mental health. And they talk about sort of how their mental health is worse off now, and how so many of them are pulling back even from news
Mm-hmm.
sources because,
News.
quite frankly, um, it makes them depressed. So we got to give voice to
Yeah.
this.
I think that's so profound what you said because, this data feels like home to us because these are the conversations that we're having at brunches and our group chats when we connect and convene. And certainly right here on Native Land Pod, we've revisited this. Why the focus on Black women as opposed to Black men? And if you have done any of that kind of research, Cornell, which I imagine you have, is there a lot of daylight between us and our beloved counterparts and their outlook on the country?
Well, can we curse on this podcast?
Absolutely.
This is I'm so sick of this narrative about sort of
Yeah.
trying to pit African American men versus African American women, right? If you look at of the history of this, go back to Carter, right? You have roughly anywhere between 12 and 19% of African Americans voting Republican. So you had roughly 13, 14% of African Americans voting Republican this past time around, and there's always a gender gap, right? Men vote more Republican than women do in every ethnic demographic group there is. You know who has the smallest difference between how their men and women vote?
Black folks.
Black
Black
men.
vote.
The difference between how Black men and Black women vote is less than 5 points. That is the lowest that's the lowest there is. So this ideal that somehow you know Black men are behaving dramatically different than the Black women in their community when we're both seeing the threats to our community and we're both frustrated with what's happening politically. I think is I think is a it's a narrative that I think is diabolical, and we've got to push back on it. I'm less worried about 13 or 14% of African American men voting Republican than I am the 40% who just are so discouraged by politics and that nothing changes, that they don't turn out. That's the difference between winning elections and losing elections, not between 2 or 3% difference between how Black men and Black women vote. It is the overwhelming lack of turnout that we've been seeing among younger voters and also voters of color, which, quite frankly, cost Harris the election a lot more so than this ideal that somehow we got to win back working class white people, non college white people. By the way, a group that has not broken for Democrats in any real way in 3 or 4 decades. And you know what percentage of non college white men, non college white voters Harris got? She got the same percentage that Biden did on his way to winning. Right? That's not the focus. We've got to energize, mobilize, and bring these people into the process.
It
So
perpetuates a narrative that the working class is white.
Yes.
or that
there
real
are Black
Americans.
working class folks. Right, exactly, Andrew. Sorry, I interrupted you. You go ahead.
No. I just
Right.
I'm glad that Cornell. One of the things I reflect on when I think about the 2024 election is how many Black men actually felt proud to finally be able to be asked the question about what they thought and what they believed. And I think some of that started to then deepen sort of this, narrative that Black men are here and Black women are there. And I think that's one of the things that this study helps to kind of go directly to the point, which is you need to know what Black women think. And not just so that they can end up in your speech, but so that your public policy starts to reflect some of these concerns. And I wonder, who should we want to be hearing from right now and quoting you all's brilliant work when it comes to the public policy agenda that is going to put progressive thinkers like myself back in charge? Because all I hear is an anti-Trump narrative, and I can't wait for the construction of, why don't we take our best assets, right? The folks who, when they're not with us, drag whoever the Democrat is at the helm, right? Their poll numbers shatter when Black women and Black men aren't there. So do you feel a sense of an early formation of that? What does the take back agenda look like for this country if it doesn't include hook, line, and sinker, which you all have identified here as the highest priority concerns that Black women are reflecting, which I would say also encompasses what Black men often think about?
I'm going to say this one thing,
security.
then I'm going to throw it to Gabrielle because I want Black women to talk more than Black men about this. But Black power starts with Black women. It just does, right? There is no Black power movement in this country without Black women being up front and making that happen, because they are the most likely, they're far more likely to vote. And that's what I tell any campaign.
Y'all cut that clip.
What I tell any campaign, and you know this from your even campaign, like if Black women galvanize around you, the community will follow. Right. So first and foremost, for anyone out there, and I tell candidates all this time, if Black women get behind you, the community will follow. And so I think that's so important to centralize this idea of Black power. I'm sorry, guys, but it does have to be centralized Black women, because they are voting in such higher numbers and turning out in so much higher numbers. And women, by the way, you're the majority. It's not us men. I'm sorry, Gabrielle. I'm gonna stop talking now.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. I'll listen to you, my brother. I would say that what's been on my mind is what Cornell didn't mention was, like, everyone is naming that this is an unfair and rigged system when we look at this data. And we know that that is true on the other side, not only for Black men, but my hunch is for the majority of Americans. And I share that because one of the reasons we started this journey was so many funders were saying to me that wealth is only about becoming a billionaire. And I said, that's not true. And I'm going to prove it. I'm going to prove it to you that wealth is more than currency. And when I look at the last 5 years, Black women have named an expansive vision of wealth. They said it's about choice. We want choice beyond a zero-sum game. We want financial freedom. We want belonging. And we want thriving health. And I'm naming those pieces because I think a lot of Americans, perhaps naively, I think this, want those four same things and are pointing to an unfair and rigged system as one of the leading causes. I think that in this moment, it's a mistake for any leader, regardless of politic, regardless of sector, to look at what we heard and think that Black women are showing up in the same way because we heard that a majority of 55% of Black women are naming we have to fight for our rights and build a future. Yes, we are naming that, but we're building very differently, right? And so I think I'm curious, Cornell and I were in a conversation last week where a sister of ours said, because I'm not putting money forward in a campaign in the same way that I did before. And so I'm naming that because I think a risk in looking at this information is that folks remain comfortable, that they make the assumption that Black women are showing up in the same way when they see that data point. And I think that would be a poor decision for anyone in their seat to make. Or core conclusion.
Is there optimism out there? Do you have optimism that some folks are catching give us the early tea leaves of how the data's landed with the donor class and the leading class, who often, frankly, go to data to shape their framework of how to move forward?
I'm cautiously optimistic, and Cornell will give me a healthy dose of skepticism in a moment.
I won't make you.
I'll say I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that what feels different this year is that we can show scale. that we're showing scale in the lived experiences, and that we're freaking consistent as Black women. We're not all of a sudden naming that we're concerned about the future. We're not all of a sudden becoming folks who are about rooted in love, rooted in justice, rooted in fairness, right? And I'm naming that because in the world I sit in of watching philanthropy ping pong words around and strategies around right now, which is part of the reason why we're in this mess, is we as Black women have always taken an emergent view of the future. And so I think that's where I have cautious optimism, is that the funder class is seeing consistency that the same values are leading our work, seeing consistency that we are not just human beings who are survivors, but human beings who want to thrive and have stories of thriving, and we're going to get there.
Native Land Pod is a production of iHeartRadio in partnership with Reason Choice Media. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.